This morning, today's a special day at Crossroads. This is our first ever Celebrate Recovery Sunday. Some of you know that we have been exploring launching a Celebrate Recovery ministry, and we thought it was time that we make sure that you know what that is and who is leading. And so, right to get things started, I'm going to ask Steve Shuett to come forward. Steve and Shirley serve as our Director of Recovery Ministries, and he's going to be kind of emceeing this morning along with me. So thanks, buddy. Sure. So,
Am I in this?
you can, sure. You bet.
Actually, all I'm going to do is read something for you today. If you know anything about Celebrate Recovery, it was started out on the West Coast at Saddleback Church. Rick Warren, who's written several books you're probably familiar with, the pastor of that church. And I'm going to read what he says Celebrate Recovery is all about. Celebrate Recovery is a biblical and balanced program that helps us overcome our hurts, habits, and hang-ups. It is based on the actual words of Jesus rather than on psychological theory. Many people are probably familiar with the classic 12-step program of AA and other groups. Well, undoubtedly, wow, now I'm getting a feedback.
There we go.
Come on, there we go. While undoubtedly many of our lives have been helped through the 12 steps, I've always been uncomfortable with the program's vagueness about the nature of God, the saving power of Jesus Christ, and the ministry of the Holy Spirit. So I began, this is Rick Warren speaking, so I began an intense study of the scriptures to discover what God had to say about recovery. And to my amazement, I found the principle of recovery in their logical order given by Jesus in his most famous message, the Sermon on the Mount. And Rick Warren then lists 6 steps that he believes are the basis for CR. First of all, he says it's based on God's Word, the Bible. And I think that is so important. Anything that's Christian, if it's really Christian, should be based on the Word of God. Because it's easy for us to put words and make up things and say, yeah, it's a Christian thing. It's really not, because it doesn't come from the Bible. Second of all, it's forward-looking. That is to say, rather than wallowing in the past or dredging up painful memories over and over and over again, we confront our past and we move on to better things. Third, Celebrate Recovery emphasizes personal responsibility. Instead of becoming victims, it asks us to face our poor choices in the past, deal with them, and then do something about it. Fourth, Celebrate Recovery emphasizes spiritual commitment to Jesus Christ. Lasting recovery cannot happen without this principle. Fifth, it utilizes the biblical truth that we need each other in order to grow spiritually and emotionally. I need you, you need me. Spiritual recovery is built around small group interaction and the fellowship of caring Christian community. And then 6, Celebrate Recovery addresses all types of hurts, habits, and hang-ups. It is a large umbrella program under which a limitless number of issues can be dealt with.
Thanks, Steve. Well, so we've got several items that we want to prepare. Steve, you want to help just pull this out so there's room for them. Thank you. Not everybody who's going to participate today loves the limelight, so we're going to let them kind of work from down here too. And first, I'm going to ask Kim and Jeff to come share with you the 8 principles and the passages from the Sermon on the Mount that forms the basis for Celebrate Recovery.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, number 1, realize that I'm not God. I admit that I am powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong thing and that my life is unmanageable.
Happy are the meek, or happy are those who know that they are spiritually poor. Matthew 5, verse 3.
Number 2, earnestly believe that God exists, that I matter to him, and that he has the power to help me recover.
Happy are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Matthew 5, verse 4.
Number 3, consciously choose to commit all my life and will to Christ's care and control.
Happy are the meek. Matthew 5, verse 5.
Number 4, openly examine and confess my faults to myself, to God, and to someone I trust.
Happy are the pure in heart. Matthew 5, verse 8.
Number 5, voluntarily submit to every change God wants to make in my life and humbly ask Him to remove my character defects.
Happy are those whose greatest desire is to do what God requires. Matthew 5, verse 6.
Number 6, evaluate all my relationships, offer forgiveness to those who have hurt me, and make amends for harm I've done to others, except when to do so would harm them or others.
Happy are the merciful. Matthew 5, 7. Happy are the peacemakers. Matthew 5, 9.
Number 7, reserve a daily time with God for self-examination, Bible reading, and prayer in order to know God and His will for my life, and to gain the power to follow His will. Oops. Number 8, yield myself to God to be used to bring this good news to others, both by my example and by my words.
Happy are those who are persecuted because they do what God requires. Matthew 5, verse 10.
So I'm going to ask Steve and Shirley to come on up. And sometimes the easiest way to get some questions answered and to learn about a program or a mission agency or a ministry is just to interview the leaders. And so I've asked Steve and Shirley to come. We've talked about some of the questions that you might have. And maybe right here.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
You want?
It's almost like we knew this was going to happen.
Exactly.
Almost.
Yeah, we had a plan.
Great. So, first of all, I don't know that I've had a chance to say this, really to introduce you guys as our recovery ministry directors. But it never existed, it didn't exist before, and you guys were working, God was working some magnificent things in your lives, and I just want to say that they have been working tirelessly, and before we go on, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you guys, and thank you. So where do we go? Sandy? Next one? So anyway, questions. And one of the questions that I'm sure I had when I sat out here in an audience like this and first heard about Celebrate Recovery, and that was, I'm not an addict. So why in the world, I mean, this doesn't apply to me, right? And why would I attend? It doesn't have anything to do with me if I'm not an addict. How would you respond?
Well, first of all, Celebrate Recovery, as I said before, is sort of like an umbrella. It's for any kind of struggle in our lives. Less than a third of the people who actually attend CR, in the hundreds and thousands of CRs across the country, less than a third of them are actually addicts. The others are coming to CR because they deal with things like anger, with anxiety, with struggles with money, with depression, all sorts of different problems that everybody has in their lives. And Celebrate Recovery is there to help them.
Good. So what should people expect when they attend a CR meeting? What's it like?
I can tell you primarily because we go to one up in Quakertown right now. And what happens is it starts around 7 o'clock in the evening. We begin by everyone, male, female, everybody together, meets in a large group, which lasts for approximately 1 hour. The first part, 20 minutes or so, is devoted primarily to worship. We sing songs, we clap, we do a lot of things just to praise the Lord. And there's a reason for that because, I'll get into that later. Following that, we read the 8 recovery principles that Jeff and Kim just read, or else we'll read the 12 recovery principles, 12 steps that comes from the other groups, but it also has a Christian background to it. Each week we alternate either a teaching or a testimony of what God has done in a person's life. Teachings are based on the scriptures, on the passages themselves. The testimonies are there to tell us exactly how people responded to the steps. Then the second hour consists of open share groups followed by a time of fellowship.
Oh, okay, so why don't you go ahead and just tell us about, you started, so tell us about the large group and kind of what that's like.
Large group meetings, the purpose is to clear our minds from focusing on the issues we've had all day long. When I come in, I'm still thinking about work or my lack of work. I just got a job, I'm starting tomorrow, guys. So the purpose of the worship is to take our minds off of what we've been doing and focusing on God, because God is the center of our recovery. Worship starts that process, and the teaching of the testimony continue it. The testimonies are based on the 8 principles or the 12 steps, and the testimonies are stories of how God has worked in people's lives to start the process of helping them to overcome their hurts, habits, and hang-ups. They're meant to encourage others that God is able to do the same for them.
Then what about, you mentioned the open share groups, so what happens in those, how does that work?
After the first hour, people break up either into men's groups or women's groups, and typically we have the groups are divided by issues. First of all, the chemical addictions group will all gather, people who have chemical addictions will all gather together. We have a group up in Quakertown for sexual addiction. And then we have what we call life issues, because everybody has an issue in their life that they are dealing with. In those groups, we realize that we're not alone in our struggles. We are sharing our problems and our issues with each other. And as we hear the stories that people tell, I can say, hey, I'm not alone in the problem that I have. These groups are separated into male or female participants only so that it's easier to share.
So when I hear about the open share groups, that's when, for some of us, the spidey sense goes off. Like, that's really vulnerable. Like, I don't know these people. Why in the world would anybody spill their guts with a bunch of people they don't know? Like, how is it safe to do that?
And this is so important because, yeah, it is a scary thing to have other people hear the issues in my life. We do that by adhering to what we call the 5-step guidelines. First of all, we keep our sharing focused on our own thoughts and feelings. We don't talk about you. When I'm talking, I don't talk about you. I don't talk about my wife. I don't talk about my aunts and uncles. I talk about the issues in my life. There's no crosstalk. In other words, when we talk,
what does crosstalk mean?
Big issue. When we get in a group and all of a sudden somebody has something they want to make a comment on what I'm saying.
Like kind of like what I just did just now?
Yeah, okay, you got it. And they want to make a comment on what I'm saying, and they interrupt, and then also we get into a conversation that excludes everybody else. That's not allowed. Third, we're here to support each other. We're not here to fix each other. I am not a counselor or a psychologist. When you come into the group, I'm going to sit and listen to what you have to say. I'm not going to comment. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to sit there and listen. And then when you finish talking, I'm going to say, thank you for sharing. Anonymity and confidentiality are primary. What stays in the group, what goes on in the group stays in the group, just like going to Las Vegas, I guess. If there's any talk at all, we hear anything at all about sharing something we hear in the group outside of the group, you'll be asked not to come back because it's that important. And then finally, offensive language. Offensive language is not allowed in a Christ-centered group. We have, obviously, people come in and they have language they use over and over and over again. You understand that. But the name of the Lord particularly is not allowed to be used, and we will call you on it, use the name of the Lord in vain. So.
Well then, tell me a little bit about, I keep hearing about step studies. So tell us a little bit about what a step study is. Sure.
Okay, that's my personal favorite, and I'll hear more about that later, but it's basically, it consists of 24 lessons that look at the 8 principles or the 12 steps on an in-depth basis. And basically, they explain the principles, and then they ask questions that enable us to see how they apply to our lives individually and our relationships. And it's a tool that God uses to help expose the sins and issues in our lives that have made us stuck, and then how they have affected us and how they've affected other people in our lives. And it's my personal favorite, as we'll hear later, because it's what God's really used in my life to bring about change. It then encourages us to surrender these areas to God for Him to work changes in us and our relationships.
So how long does a step study usually take?
Well, it usually takes about 9 to 12 months of meeting weekly, and it depends on the size of the group, because the more people in the group and everybody is sharing on the questions, the longer it would take. As with the open share groups, they're gender specific. There's men's groups and there's women's groups. They don't meet together. Each person shares his or her answers to the questions, and then through the sharing, we find out we're not alone in our struggles. We learn from one another, and we begin the process of healing. And it kind of goes along with what James 5:16 says: confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed.
These are commonly asked questions. We get them all the time. But you may have other questions, and I would really encourage you to come up afterwards if you have any questions at all. We'd be glad to see if we can help answer them. So thank you very much for letting us talk.
Great. Before they step down, and we've got a couple of testimonies that we want to share, and if you want to go down there, that's fine. But I guess I just want to frame this up. I was going to say this at the end, but I almost feel like if you don't have a filter, you don't have a place to put this in your mind, you may miss something. Some of you are thinking to yourself, I have issues, we all have issues, but I'm not that bad. Or I'm not one of those people. And the first thing I would say is, praise the Lord, we're so glad. We're so glad you're not one of those people. But earlier you said that, well, I mean, we all have problems, and we all would agree with that as Christians. The real question is, well, I've got this theory that the stuff that is easy to change in our Christian life, we change it early. We change it within months of coming to faith. But then we start bumping into stuff that's harder to change. Really not sure why. Some of it's rooted in the way we were raised, some of it's rooted in our temperament, some of it's rooted in addictions. But if you're here this morning and you would never want anyone to really know it, but you actually have at least one of those issues. What issues? The issue that you can't fix. The thing that you know the Lord doesn't want you to be doing, and yet you just keep doing it. So if you've been around church for a long time, you're going to think, well, that's silly. That's where we all are. That's the problem. Because I think sometimes we just come to accept that at this point now, my spiritual life's pretty much just plateaued, and if I'm lucky, it just stays this good, doesn't go down, but this is as far as I go because I'm stuck. And Jesus says, no, you're not. It is possible to keep growing and keep pursuing Him, but not until you deal with the thing that's stuck. And so what happens is, we try to act like we're not stuck. And we get really good at acting not stuck. And all of the energy that could be going into getting healed and being free goes into pretending we're not stuck. All the time, you're more stuck. And so I think this isn't Celebrate Recovery. This is Jesus talking. When He says, if you are willing to be honest about where you are stuck, I can get you unstuck. Perfect? No. You might get unstuck to hit the next thing that you get stuck on. But the issue is you can be free. Sometimes I'm afraid we as a church body we feel impotent. Because if we can't even change ourselves, where do we get off thinking we can change the world? Jesus says, but I can't change you. But it doesn't happen by itself. This is the stuff that's hard to change, and it only gets changed when you get the help of other brothers and sisters in Christ. Some of you know me well enough to know that the last few weeks I've been talking a lot about being a workaholic. Okay? What?
How does the army?
Yeah.
We have a group for that.
So the last time I went to one of the one-day summits, and I'm listening to some of the pastors of the other churches get up saying, I'm Pastor Mike, grateful believer in the Lord Jesus Christ who struggles with workaholism and codependency. And I went, me too. I would love for you guys to think that as your pastor, I don't have any other stuck things. But not only would that not be true and authentic, it wouldn't be the gospel. So all of this today is about this truth, that if you have the courage to actually admit to what it is that you're stuck with, and you're willing to start taking the chance, perhaps associating with those people, yeah, and all the rest of those broken people, I'm one. I keep making the same mistake over and over and over. And I'm so grateful that Jesus says he loves me anyway. And he can change me. I can't wait for that day. That's really what CR is about. It is an extension of the gospel. Have you ever, you trusted Christ and then that was it? So now you're deputized, you're the gospel carrier, and now the gospel is for other people? No, the gospel is still for you. It's still for me. That's what we're talking about, is the courage to admit that I'm kind of stuck in this or stuck in that, and there is no shame. There's only the chance for healing and forgiveness. That being said, now many of you feel the way I have felt. I need to be going to this. I need to be involved. I'm stuck. I don't know if they have a group for me, but I'm stuck. And let me encourage you that before we're done today, you're going to hear about other people that were stuck, other people that have experienced being freed, and you're going to find out that it's actually safe to approach one of them and say, should we, when? Because we believe that CR is simply an extension of the gospel.
Amen.
So who's first?
Dawn.
Okay, John. I'm not done.
We got a group for that.
And I'm in it. When you go to the CR summits and the large groups, this last time I went, you drove up, it's at a church, must have been 75 people standing on the sidewalk outside. At first I thought it was like a soccer game. Then I realized, no, they're cheering. They're cheering. Woo! Yeah, woo! And they're clapping, screaming. I'm thinking, that's weird. I wonder who arrived. Somebody famous got there. And then I noticed they're doing it for every single person who's coming to the conference. I thought, well, that's kind of nice. A little goofy, a little weird. Okay, kind of nice. Till I got to the sidewalk. And I'm not a shy person. But when they were all shouting at the top of their lungs for me, and being a smart aleck like I am, I said to the first guy that I saw, I said, why would you cheer for me? He said, because you are here! Nothing good happens unless you come and you're here! And all of a sudden, they were cheering for me also. And what, from the parking lot, I thought was a little silly, now became moving. So, it is okay to cheer for people today. Yay, Don! Woo!
So, well, listen, I wanted to say that I started going to CR in November 2014 at Franconia Mennonite Church on Monday nights. And I enjoyed it so much that when Steve and Shirley invited me to Morning Star in Quakertown on January 14, 2015, I fell in love with the music. It was the poppin' place to be on a Wednesday night. And it is the best place to be. I can't get enough of CR, and hearing the testimonies of what God is doing in everyone's life was so inspiring to me. That kept me going, and in small group, it was good to know that what I shared and what I still share stays in the group. So, I felt safe to share. I felt like no one could judge me, but God. I'm not perfect, nor will I ever be, but with prayer and encouragement, I keep going. I learned a lot about me. For example, CR is for hurts, habits, and hang-ups, etc. Well, I go for codependency, depression, and anxiety, and used to be a gambling issue. So I have victory over the gambling and casino. I'm always going to be codependent, which my problem is I want everyone to be happy and not mad at me. I would give money to someone to be accepted and loved by that individual. Well, in July, it will be a year that I haven't did this. So I'm making baby steps, but I admit my faults to God and people I trust. And in this journey of CR, I learned about the step study, 12-step class that they had to offer. And in August 18th, 2015, I made the choice to try it. And it really made me see that in my life, I have issues that made me see I was in denial about. A lot of things. I had resentments towards others. I needed to make amends with people. I needed forgiveness of people that I harmed or those who have harmed me. And going to the step study every Tuesday night was a commitment. And many times I wanted to give up. I made friendships with all the ladies. They were a part of my life from August 2015 till May 2016. I completed my first step study and just received my 12-step coin. From what I hear, some people do multiple step studies. I just finished one and I'm not ready for another one yet. Also, if you come to CR, you can earn chips like me. I have a welcome chip, a 30-day chip, a 60-day chip, 90-day chip, a 6-month chip, and a 9-month chip.
Yay!
I don't give, I get a yearly one because, and soon I'll be getting a yearly one because it's been a year that I haven't given money for acceptance. This program works if you work it. Oh, in the step study program, I have a sponsor who's there for me, understands me. She's strong, and I'm lucky to have Shirley as mine. And Tara and Sarah, accountability partners. I strongly encourage men and women to try CR. You have nothing to lose, just a lot to gain.
That's a tough act to follow. My name is Shirley, and I'm going to introduce myself the way we do on Wednesday nights. I'm Shirley. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus. He has given me victory over obsessive thinking and denial. I still struggle with codependency, control issues, and the anxiety that results from trying to control things.
Hey, Shirley.
That's what we do. We say hi to each other. Yeah. I wanted to share, even though I'm a person that gets nervous, I really wanted to share because God has chosen to use step studies as a tool in my life to bring about significant changes. It's exciting to see the process God has led and is still leading me through. I entered my first step study filled with anxiety to the point that it had become obsessive thinking. All I could think about was my son's drug addiction. My thoughts whirled around what I should be doing to control it, or else condemning myself for failing to control it. That's all I thought about day and night. God had to clear my mind so I could hear his voice. I couldn't hear anything. I'd come to church. I couldn't hear anything because my thoughts were just so in a whirl. God showed me from Proverbs 3:5-6, that the source of my anxiety was leaning on my own understanding, constantly trying to figure things out. I needed to trust him instead because I didn't have the answers. I needed to allow him to direct my steps and not take matters into my own hands. Once I allowed God to take control, he cleared my mind of obsessive thinking. He then used the second step study to show me how I had used denial as a form of self-protection to shield myself from emotional pain. See, my approach in life to fix problems, my approach in life was first to try to fix a problem through controlling it. Then, if that didn't work, I would resort to denial, pretending everything was okay. And that's what I had done in my marriage. I couldn't fix my husband's sexual addiction, so I pretended that my marriage was okay to avoid emotional pain. God enabled me to face the truth, admit my powerlessness to change my husband, and pray for God's intervention in his life. God did intervene through agreeing prayer. And he is in the process of restoring our marriage as we learn to speak the truth in love.
Yay.
Finally, in my third step study, I think I've developed an addiction. Step studies. God showed me the jealousy in my own heart towards my dad's wife, Mary. 10 months after my mother died, my dad remarried. I felt like his whole life revolved around his new wife and her family. I responded by isolating myself from them again to spare myself from emotional pain. I repented of my jealousy, but I wasn't sure of the right way to approach making amends with the hope of restoring the relationship. So I prayed with Steve for God to show me what to do. After I prayed for 2 weeks, Mary called me. God enabled a conversation to open up that allowed me to make amends and start the process of reconciliation. Subsequent conversations built on that. And in our last conversation, Mary said to me, "I think we're going to become best friends." It's a miracle. After sharing about the changes that God has made in my life, I wanted to make sure that I didn't create a false impression. I have not arrived. I still struggle with many life issues, especially anxiety. The difference is that God has used the step studies to make me aware of when I start to fall back into old patterns. I can then move more quickly to ask for his help to get back on track. And I also know that I can call others who will support me and pray with me. I don't struggle alone. Ecclesiastes 5:9 says, "Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity the person who falls and has no one to help them up." Thanks for letting me share.
And Susan.
First, I'd like to say, I'm giving my testimony. I attend CR at two places. I attend regularly CR at Franconia CR, Franconia Mennonite Church. I have done the step study program. When you finish your step study program, you do an inventory. You finish the inventory, you finish the course. They ask you if you do your testimony in front of everybody. So this is the testimony. Actually, I've done it twice a day in the church. and this will be my third time. Isaiah 4:10-11 says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my right hand." Good morning. My name is Susan. I'm a faithful believer in Jesus Christ. I was born in Abilene, Kansas. When I was 1 year old, my parents moved to a small town in Potter County, Pennsylvania. There were 6 children in my family. My father would work 2 or 3 jobs at a time to provide for the family. My mother stayed at home and raised us. At the age of 2, my mother started sexually abusing me, which became a violent nightmare which has never left me. At the age of 7, I was sent to the store to buy my father a pack of cigarettes. On the way to the store, I was run over by a semi-truck, which chose to drive around me rather than to stop and swerved in my direction. I tried to run back, but it hit me and threw me across the road, and I hit my head on a curb. This left me with a fractured skull, and so bruised, when I came home from the hospital, my sister said I was not her sister. I was paralyzed for a year from the waist down. My father would carry me downstairs every morning, and my mother would beat me in the head if I cried. I wish she would beat me on my legs so I wouldn't feel it. My mother would beat us every day. Her favorite thing to do was to make us go outside and pick a stick off the lilac bush. Then she would line us up and beat us with our sticks. My sister and I would have to do all the chores. I remember having to stand on a chair to be able to wash the dishes. If the water was not hot enough, she would hold our hands down in very hot water and burn them. We were dirt poor. We had to walk about 3 miles to school every day. The kids would make fun of us because we didn't have proper clothes and we were dirty. I hated school and everyone in my class. I had to make good grades or get beat. I had no friends in school, not even by the time I graduated. I didn't go to any school activities except for basketball, which I was very good at and played on the first string. My father took us to church. We were never allowed to go to Sunday school. We had to sit very still. If we even touched a hymnal, my father would snap his finger and we would cry because we knew that we would get a whipping from his belt when we got home. When we got older, I asked my father why he stopped going to church. He said, "I raised you how to act in church, and you know how to act." I loved church and Jesus very much, and was very active in church. I loved God and became a Christian when I was 11 and was baptized in Pine Creek. When I was a senior in high school, I was the director of the children's ministry, head of the youth group, and delegate to annual conference and on the church board. The thing that upset me the most was when they taught that we should love our neighbor as ourselves. I wondered why God would say that, because I could love my neighbor, but I still hated myself. My home life never got better. When I became a teenager, my older brother started sexually abusing me, and my mother tried to kill me with a knife. I would have to hit her to keep her from hurting me. My sister would tell me I was going to hell because I hit my mother. When I graduated from high school, I went to church camps and annual conference. I remember when I came home that summer, I washed my clothes and packed them and left for Bible school, college the next day in Cincinnati, Ohio. I never went back. I went to college for 2 years. In the summertime, I worked at the Baptist home and lived there. When school started, I continued to work. When I came home, I was not allowed to turn on my light to study, so I would crawl under my bunk and study with a flashlight. School was very strict and very hard. I made all A's and B's except for Greek, which I failed. At the end of the second year, the Dean of Women said to me my grades were not good enough, so I could not return the next year. This just added to the hate I had for myself. I continued to live in Cincinnati. I had a one-room apartment and walked to work every day. I made a friend at work. Her name was Pepper. She came from a large family of 13. Her mother, Evelyn, was a Christian who loved me, and I loved her. She was a great influence in my life. One day she said to me, "You are not this kind of girl, and I expect you to see you in my church tomorrow." Pepper and I went to church and sat in the last row. I noticed the organist, and when he and the pastor marched out of church at the end of the service, I told Pepper I was going to marry him. She laughed, but a year later, Glenn and I would marry. Glenn and I lived in Cincinnati for a year, and then he said he wanted to move to Pennsylvania to live closer to his parents, so we moved to Hardersville. Life was great, but I still hated myself. We have one son and a happy and perfect family. When I was 38, I fell into a deep major depression. I tried to kill myself several times. I truly hated myself and my mother. I spent more time in a hospital than at home. My husband and my son never stopped loving me and continued praying for me. My doctor at the Penn Foundation did not give up on me either. He called for a family meeting, and my mother came. The doctor said he could not understand why I was so depressed and kept trying to kill myself. My mother told him she knew why. It was because she sexually abused me and beat me every day. The doctor threw her out of the hospital, but he understood what was wrong with me. Several years passed with a lot of electrical shock therapy and medicine. I gradually got better. I went to a therapist who told me I could never hold down a full-time job or get well. So I had to prove her wrong. I got a full-time job at Walmart, but I still hated myself and my mother. In April of last year, Steve, a member of my church, invited me to celebrate recovery to hear his testimony. I figured, why not? I love Steve and his wife Shirley and wanted to support them. After I started coming to CR and saw the loving people and God's love for me, no one judged me, and I was treated with love and respect. When it was my turn to share, everyone listened to me with no judgment. On Mother's Day, my church, the minister preached on how God wanted us to love our mother, no matter how terrible she treated us. I went to CR and told them what he said. I realized I had to forgive her to find peace in my life. Later in the year, I joined a step study group and learned God loved me and I should not hate myself. I was not a piece of damaged goods, but a beautiful person God created.
Amen.
Now I am medicine-free and free from depression. I no longer have to see doctors. I attend CR faithfully, and through step study, I've stopped hating my family and the people in my home area, and most importantly, I have stopped hating myself. I have filled my life with God's love. My mother and father have both passed away. I have a beautiful grandson, a loving son and daughter-in-law, and a very loving husband. God has truly blessed me and given me CR to bring healing in my life so I can now help others. Thank you for listening.
smooth transition. But to be honest, none of us wanted to move during Susan's testimony. I will say, some of you have known Glenn and Susan for a while. So you know that in the last year or two, something happened. Something happened.
Amen.
The kind of thing that we'd like to believe happens. Sounds like storybook.